Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Find Disaster. This is not Battlefield 1, not Battlefield 4, but instead not even a video related to Battlefield directly at all. I wanted today to answer a number of questions that I've gotten over my time of making YouTube regarding my setup, my PC, the programs I use to record, to edit, and of course my game settings as well. So that's what we're covering in today's video. I thought for Christmas I'd do something a little bit different, and given that a number of you likely will be getting either new game consoles, new components for your PC, or maybe even a brand new gaming PC over Christmas, I thought this may be slightly relevant to the occasion. Now, if you're not watching this video on Christmas, I just hope you have a good day. If you're watching this video on Christmas, I wish you a very happy Merry Christmas. Enjoy the time with your family, enjoy the time off, and enjoy playing a little bit of Battlefield most likely. With that being said, those of you who follow kind of rigs more closely or more into the PC gaming hardware aspect, you will see that my setup is relatively cramped, and that's because, well, frankly, I'm at university now. I don't have unlimited space as I used to have to basically set up my rig on a massive table. So imagine this in a more glamorous settings for the large majority of my time doing YouTube. Just since I'm here at uni, it's had to be kind of cramped in a little bit of space, but the functionality of it all remains the same. I can still do my job and still play my games, and that's really in effect what counts. Let's start off quickly then with the components of the main gaming PC. Those are as follows, and they will be on your screen as well. A 5820K i7 clocked at up to 3.8 gigahertz. That's when engaged in turbo boost mode, obviously. Accompanying that i7 is a GTX 1080 from Asus, the Strix variant, clocked at just over 2000 megahertz when under load. Of course, then we have also got a little bit of RAM in the system, 16 gigabytes to be precise, DDR4 at 2133 megahertz, a small SSD for the operating system, a big hard drive for everything else. And following actually the posting of this video, when this video does air shortly afterwards, I will have received a relatively large SSD to put all my games on, likely going to be around 500 gigabytes, my own Christmas present to myself, which will then also be part of the rig. Moving on then to the peripherals, we've got a monitor, of course, an Asus ROG Swift PG278Q. Look it up if you want to. Essentially what this is a TM panel, a 1440p, 27-inch, 144Hz G-Sync monitor. Fantastic for FPS gaming. I'm lucky to be able to afford something like this. Moving on then to the keyboard. In my case, that is a Razer Deathstalker Chroma. This may be an unusual choice for those of you more familiar with PC gaming keyboards. It's a relatively low-profile keyboard, but that's just one of the quirks that I have. Coming from growing up using a lot of laptops and otherwise Bluetooth keyboards, very flat keyboards, I'm not so accustomed to the full-fledged keyboard and like to have a more low-profile keyboard, which is why for me the Deathstalker Chroma was the perfect pick. Mouse is a Rocat Cone XTD optical. This is actually the newest addition to my setup, and that I only bought it about 2 months ago, I'd argue. I before that had a very small, low-budget Rocat mouse with about $15–20, which was good and solid as well, but was just slowly cramping up my hand because it was a little bit of a too small fit for my hand. Not as relevant to gaming, but just as important for making YouTube videos, especially those commentaries, is of course the microphone, which in my case is a Blue Yeti on some form of kind of stand that I got arranged for and modified to make it fit to the desk, and of course a pop filter to keep all the annoying T's and P's to a minimum in my commentary. Next up then we can move on to the secondary PC, and I am actually fortunate enough to have an old PC on which I can render and edit on, and then keep my gaming PC just for gaming, which means I can multitask a little bit better as well, especially useful when trying to render out those large files or import them into the editing program. Now this is a 2011 iMac 27-inch. Now, for those of you who know just a slight bit about Apple computers, you know this is relatively old and likely not really suited for the task of editing, but let me assure you, I have over the years kept it hardware wise and software wise in a good newer condition, and as you will see, it's more than fit to do the job. I grew up on Apple computers, not on Windows, and as such it's just more comfortable for me to do a number of things like editing on the iMac, on Apple's software and system, and that's why for me I still prefer editing and working on the Apple system on Mac OS X instead of Windows. That's not to say that I'm not aware of the benefits and disadvantages of both the Windows system and of course the Mac OS X system. Anyway, the hardware specs of this system, it's an i7 2600 at 3.8 gigahertz. That's to say the turbo boost is at 3.8 gigahertz, default 3.4 gigahertz, i7 quad core, 16 gigabytes of DDR3, 1333 megahertz RAM, an AMD 6970M with 2 gigabytes, a 1TB SSD, and of course the screen is a 1440p IPS panel. I must say the system has done me well and still performs excellent at the editing tasks that I throw it at. Obviously I have upgraded it over the years. It didn't default come with 16GB RAMs. It most certainly did not have a terabyte of SSD in it. However, the rest of the components are actually original, and I can say it's served me well over the years and continues to be an integral part of my video production. And with the hardware being covered, let's just quickly touch on the software I use to record before we move on to my game settings and of course my mouse sensitivity and the other things that you guys want to know. I record obviously with Shadowplay at maximum settings at 1440p. This then gets transferred over to Final Cut Pro on my macOS X, where I do most of the editing. All the graphics that you see, the thumbnails, etc., they're done in Photoshop CS6. When it comes to audio, it's either Shadowplay recording my audio if it's a live commentary. However, given that 99% of my videos are not live commentaries, I use Audacity to record my commentaries afterwards. It's a relatively simple program. It's free. It's served me well. Once you get the hang of the basics and how to use it, it's relatively simple to get your head around it. With that being said, let's move on then to my settings in Battlefield 1. When it comes to my settings in Battlefield 1, there isn't actually too many special ones that I have. One of them may be my kind of hit indicator colors, which you can see here. I usually have yellow for the standard hit indicator. Headshot is red with me, and the killing blow is usually black. Otherwise, most of these things here are standard. If you want to copy them, just feel free to pause the video and set your game accordingly. This is what's kind of, I mess with these as I go and set them to what I prefer as I experience the game. So these settings have kind of been adjusted over time. But now I'm more or less at the point where I can say I don't really need to change any of them anymore. When it comes to my actual video settings, brightness 75%, quite a bit of FOV here at 95, at least plus 95, 79 base value. Obviously, I'm not going to have any motion blur on. Also, the weapon DOF, in my opinion, I don't kind of fancy that. I don't like it, and as such, I've turned it off. When it comes to the advanced graphic settings, essentially, I play at relatively low settings, you may be surprised. Well, now medium isn't that low, but it's still, well, relative to what the rig that I'm running with a 1080 seems rather little. And that's because I just value FPS over graphic fidelity, at least when it comes to first-person shooter. When it comes to something like, for example, GTA, I'm more likely to turn up the graphics and turn down the FPS. But when it comes to Battlefield, I'm always aiming for at least 120, 130 FPS, and that is at 1440p. So 2560 times 1440p, not full HD, and that does require quite a bit of graphical power. So I kind of usually have between, I'd say, 130 to maybe even 150, 60 FPS when it comes to these settings. So it allows me basically and essentially to always have an extremely smooth running game. Now, some of you won't necessarily approve of these settings. Some of you prefer graphical fidelity and are just fine playing at 60 frames per second. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, this is just the way I run my game. One point I would point out here is the mesh quality. If you have a higher end system, always run mesh quality, even if you're going for high performance, high frames at ultra, because it just basically allows you to more precisely see out at range. Mesh quality, as far as I know at least, is how kind of sharp things are in distance, and you really do want to be able to tell every individual out in the distance apart. You want to really have kind of that eagle eye vision, especially when playing the scout, but this is useful for all classes. When it comes to the actual settings, control settings, keyboard bindings, there's nothing actually out of the ordinary. I don't think I changed pretty much anything here. Also, soldier mouse sensitivity and vehicle mouse sensitivity, everything here is 20%. I usually do my settings regarding, for example, sensitivity, as you'll see in just a moment, on the actual mouse itself and not necessarily in the games, because I like a little bit of consistency. With that being said, there is one thing I changed, but it's more or less insignificant, and that is pitch up. I kind of bound that to space for planes. I admittedly hardly ever fly, but if I do, I found it a lot easier to turn tight corners if I can just simply press space to pitch up. With that being said, let's move on then to my mouse settings. Last but not least, then, probably the easiest question for me to answer, my mouse sensitivity. As you can see here, the current mode selected is DPI setting 3, 1000 DPI. That's what I generally play at. However, it hasn't always been the case. That is to say, there's a reason why on DPI setting 2, I still have an 800 DPI setting, which I can actually dynamically switch in between while using my mouse. The reason for this was that actually my previous mouse, the other Rocket mouse, which I earlier mentioned, was actually used by me at 800 DPI, and when using the new mouse I decided to switch things up and go for higher DPI because it just felt a little bit better. So there was a certain period of adjustment which I had to go through, which is why I still have the 800 DPI setting available here to me, which at the beginning I would actually refer back to at times when I was kind of a little bit on the slow side, looking for more accurate shots with a sniper rifle. However, in the meantime, I've gotten used to the new DPI setting and reliably, and in all games, play at 1000 DPI. So I hope that answers your question with that regard. With all that being covered now, feel free to leave down below in the comments your questions that still remain regarding my rig, regarding my editing process, video creation process, anything else related to the matter. Feel free to leave it down below in the comments, as well as, of course, your future video suggestions for Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I once more wish you a happy Christmas or happy New Year if this is when you're watching this video, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 4 video.